You won't believe what happened in a quiet suburban neighborhood when one woman let her assumptions get the best of her. It all started when HOA Karen spotted a sleek, bright yellow Lamborghini parked in the garage of her neighbor, a black man she barely knew. Instead of knocking on the door or saying hello, she immediately called the cops. Convinced something was wrong, her fear and prejudice set off a chain of events that no one saw coming. The man, calm and collected, was simply enjoying the fruits of his hard work. He had earned that car and the life he was building, but Karen couldn't see past her own judgment. Tension was thick as neighbors peeked from their windows, unsure of what was happening. What began as a simple misunderstanding quickly escalated into a confrontation that would shake the community in just 7 minutes. The situation took a shocking turn. Authorities arrived, statements were made, and Karen's world began to unravel faster than anyone expected. The man stayed composed, but the questions everyone had about justice, fairness, and assumptions lingered in the air. This isn't just a story about a car or a call to the police, it's about bias, power, and what happens when someone jumps to conclusions without knowing the full truth. By the end of this story, you'll see why a single decision can change everything in moments, leaving even the most confident person stunned. Wait until you see what happened 7 minutes after that phone call. It's shocking, and it will leave you speechless. Before that fateful call, life in the neighborhood had seemed ordinary. The man with the Lamborghini had moved in quietly a few months ago, keeping to himself, focused on his work and building his dreams. He was known to a few neighbors as friendly but private, never one to show off or cause trouble. Yet, when Karen caught a glimpse of the expensive car in his garage, her assumptions overpowered any curiosity or common sense. Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of neighborhood rules, had a reputation for reporting the smallest perceived infractions. She prided herself on maintaining order but often let suspicion guide her actions. When she dialed 911, she painted a story in her mind, a narrative of someone flaunting wealth they shouldn't have, someone she believed didn't belong. Her voice was sharp, certain, filled with the kind of confidence that comes from never questioning one's own biases. Meanwhile, the man noticed her staring from across the street. He had no idea why she was upset, but he stayed calm, keeping a respectful distance. The tension was visible. Neighbors started whispering, some filming from their porches, sensing that something bigger than a simple HOA complaint was unfolding. The flashing lights of approaching police cars added to the unease, and the quiet streets of the community now felt charged with suspicion and judgment. Every second stretched longer than it should have. Karen's anger, the man's calm, and the watchful eyes of the neighborhood created a fragile, suspense-filled moment. No one could predict what would happen next, and the air was thick with questions. Would this escalate further? Was justice really on its way? Or was this a confrontation about assumptions ready to explode? As the police cruisers pulled up, Karen's chest swelled with a mix of pride and anticipation. She imagined the officers questioning the man, expecting him to stumble under scrutiny, perhaps reveal something suspicious. She whispered to herself about rules, fairness, and what she saw as her duty. But from across the driveway, the man remained calm, his posture relaxed, his hands visible. He hadn't done anything wrong, and yet he could feel the weight of assumptions pressing down on him. Some neighbors watched quietly, torn between curiosity and discomfort. A few knew Karen's history of overreacting, while others had heard whispers about the man's success, how he'd built his business from scratch, his reputation for honesty and hard work preceding him. These unseen threads added complexity to the moment. What looked like a simple HOA conflict was layered with bias, pride, and misunderstanding. Inside the police cruiser, officers prepared to approach cautiously, aware that high-tension situations could turn unpredictable. Karen recounted her story, embellishing details without realizing how much she sounded like she was fueling a fire that didn't exist. Meanwhile, the man's phone buzzed with a message from a friend warning him to stay calm, reminding him that how he handled the moment could shape the outcome. Every glance between Karen, the officers, and the man carried unspoken stakes. The tension was electric. Every second seemed to stretch into eternity. What would happen when words finally met actions? Would justice be served fairly, or would assumptions continue to drive the narrative? The neighborhood held its breath, caught in a moment where a simple misunderstanding threatened to explode into something far more serious. The air was thick with tension as the officers stepped out of their cruisers, their eyes scanning the scene carefully. Karen, feeling vindicated, walked toward them with a sense of authority, her voice loud and insistent as she recounted her story. She gestured toward the garage, emphasizing every word as if the Lamborghini itself were proof of wrongdoing. Her confidence radiated, but beneath it, a faint unease flickered. Something didn't feel entirely under control. The man stood at the edge of his driveway, hands raised slightly, calm but alert. He had seen situations like this before, how quickly fear and assumptions could spiral. But even he hadn't anticipated the speed with which Karen had escalated things. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and fences, phones recording, hearts pounding. Every click of a camera, every whisper, seemed to stretch the seconds into eternity. Karen's narrative grew louder, her assumptions spilling over as the officers listened, jotting notes and exchanging glances. The man's lawyer friend was on speakerphone, advising him to remain still, to not react. But the electricity of the moment was hard to ignore. The tension between what was real and what Karen imagined threatened to boil over. Then, one of the officers approached the garage, shining a flashlight, asking questions that no one expected. Karen gasped, stepping closer, her fingers trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. The man's heart raced, his calm demeanor hiding the anxiety beneath. The whole neighborhood seemed frozen, waiting for the inevitable clash. Every eye was on the driveway, every heartbeat synced with the seconds ticking by. Something big was about to happen, something that could change the neighborhood forever. And no one could guess the twist that was just moments away. Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get any tense, a second twist shook the entire block. One of the officers, walking slowly toward the garage, noticed something unusual: a set of documents, partially visible through the car window. Curiosity mixed with caution as he bent down to inspect them. Karen's eyes widened. She thought she had anticipated every angle, every detail, but this was new. Her confidence faltered for a brief moment, though she quickly masked it with louder proclamations of authority. Meanwhile, the man stayed perfectly composed, though inside, his mind raced. Those documents weren't secrets, but they revealed something unexpected. They proved ownership, insurance, and legal compliance in ways that would challenge every assumption Karen had made. The tension ratcheted higher as the officers exchanged glances, realizing this was more than a simple HOA complaint. Neighbors murmured, some gasping quietly. Sensing that the story had just taken a dramatic turn, Karen, sensing that the narrative might slip out of her control, became more insistent, her tone sharper, trying to redirect the attention back to her version of events. But the officers weren't entirely convinced, and the man's calm demeanor began to stand in stark contrast to Karen's frantic energy. Each moment stretched longer, each heartbeat louder. As the stakes grew higher, it was clear this wasn't just about a Lamborghini anymore. It was about assumptions, bias, and the sudden reversal of roles. The block was silent, every neighbor glued to the unfolding drama. Something monumental was about to happen, a twist that would leave everyone shocked, and no one could predict who would come out on top. The tension exploded in a moment that left everyone frozen. One of the officers finally spoke, asking Karen to step back as they carefully reviewed the documents from the Lamborghini. It quickly became clear that the man had done nothing wrong. Every piece of paperwork was legitimate, every detail above board. The evidence was undeniable, and the officers' expressions shifted from caution to quiet disbelief. Karen's face turned red as realization hit her. She had misjudged him entirely. But just as the immediate conflict seemed to settle, a loud commotion erupted behind Karen. Another officer had noticed something, alarming: a warrant issued against her for previous false reports and harassment within the neighborhood. In an instant, the roles reversed. Karen, who had come armed with authority and self-righteousness, was now being confronted with consequences she hadn't anticipated. Neighbors gasped as they watched her being led away, the arrogance replaced with shock and fear. The man, still calm, allowed himself a small smile, his composure never broken. His dignity and patience had carried him through, and the truth had vindicated him in front of the entire neighborhood. Whispers spread about how quickly assumptions can backfire, and how prejudice can cloud judgment in ways no one expects. But just as people began to relax, a knock came at the man's door. He opened it to find a stranger holding an envelope with his name on it, claiming urgent legal